March. That was when everything started to fall apart. But one evening, we were supposed to go out after I finished work, but Jess stood me up. She's the most respectful, caring, genuine person you'll ever meet. It was completely unlike her to do something like that. I was standing around like a complete idiot, waiting for her for ages, texting her, leaving voice messages, until she finally sent me some feeble text saying she was unwell or something. And I finally got hold of her after she gave me the runaround for a couple of days. She told me that she'd seen this drunken tramp on the way to meet me, and she was convinced it was her father, a man who she hadn't seen since she was 10 or 11. She freaked out and left, but when she decided she should go back, he'd gone, completely disappeared, like a ghost. Since Jess became absolutely obsessed with trying to find this bloke, that she was convinced it was her father. She'd walk the streets for hours asking people about him, but this tramp was nowhere to be found. And I tried to reason with her that surely it wasn't her dad, but she was absolutely insistent that it was him. April was probably the hardest month of my life. Jess was almost completely different. She'd regressed almost. She was like this lost little girl. Seeing who she thought was her father had woken something in her. Something she'd buried deep. She was never the most open of books, but I thought this might have been the sort of thing she could have talked to me about. But she'd become impossible to talk to, and we ended up arguing loads. We would never normally do that, and the only time we'd ever argue was about like the dumbest of things. Like, I playfully stopped talking to her for an hour because she didn't like my Game of Thrones finale theory. Actually, I don't even think it was an hour. Besides, after it aired, she admitted that mine was better than the actual finale anyway. But now we're getting into these unbelievable rows over absolutely nothing. May was when it was all over. We'd known each other forever, and I was convinced that she was my soulmate. We've both only ever been in one proper long-term relationship, and that was with each other. We'd never spoken much about our future plans, but naively, I assumed we were on the same page. My plans weren't anything grand or unusual. I wanted children, her children. I wanted a place to call our own, and I wanted us to get married. When I tried to talk to her about those things, to make sure we were both heading in the same direction, especially after all the fights we kept getting into, she told me that she didn't want to have children because she didn't want to disappoint them. She didn't want to get married because she didn't want to let me down. And she said she wasn't interested in buying a place together because there were too many people without anywhere to call their own. There's people that you'll put your life on hold for. And I would put my life on hold for her if I thought this crazed obsession of hers, trying to find this ghost who claimed was her father, would either end or just resolve itself. And after one final row, that was it. June is when we should have been celebrating our anniversary if we were still together. We'd have been going out 5 years. Funnily enough, on the day of what would have been our anniversary, I bumped into her stepdad in Asda. It was nice to see him, and he told me Jess wasn't doing so good, but bumping into her stepdad was just one of the many occasions that kept reminding me of how little I actually knew Jess. Even though we'd been together that long. You see, I actually didn't realise for ages that the people who I thought were her dad and brother were actually her stepdad and stepbrother. You never know. They have a brilliant relationship, but she never told me. It was only when I was having a casual chat with her stepdad that he told me that they were step relations, and we'd been going out for at least 6 months by that point when she told me. July was when I went on a date with my friend. I say friend, her name was Steph. My friend Steve set us up. She was a really sweet girl, but painfully dull. The only saving grace was that I could go on a date and actually have a drink. That helped massively. When I was with Jess, I'd only ever drink when I was out with the boys. Jess not only didn't drink, but she'd get incredibly nervous around people, whoever were drinking. I never knew why, but after finding out about her dad being a homeless alcoholic, it kind of made more sense. Anyway, needless to say, there was no second date. Now, August is when we should have gone on holiday together. It was all booked. Way back when a breakup was completely unimaginable. We decided earlier on that I'd go with Steve instead and he would reimburse her. But it was another moment where it brought home to me that there was just so much about Jess I didn't know or understand. Like, she was happy to fly abroad with me, but for love nor money, I couldn't get her on a train. All my friends thought that she was a bit of an eco-nut because she rode a bike everywhere. But that wasn't why she refused to learn to drive. September is always the month I hate the most. Because summer's over and seasons change, usually quite drastically and almost overnight. It almost depresses me. I can't stand it. And this September it seems colder, darker and greyer without Jess. October is when she calls me out the blue. She'd excitedly told me that she'd finally tracked down her dad, who crazily enough was the drunken man who she saw on the streets. And now he was clean and sober for the first time in years and engaged to get married. Lucky him. She had arranged to meet up with her dad and his fiancée. It was the first time they'd seen each other in over a decade, and she wanted me to go with him. for moral support. Man, I wasn't sure what to do. I could tell that she wasn't asking because she wanted me to be there. But because she needed me to be there. And I asked her if she'd been seeing anyone else, but she seemed incredibly offended. She clearly hadn't. She'd been focused on finding her father. I was really pleased for her, like hopefully she could start to build a better life for herself, grow and move on from whatever had happened in the past and had been holding her back. There was times that haunted her and that refused to tell even me about. November was the time I went on the weirdest double date I'd ever been on. After much indecision, I agreed to go with Jess to meet her dad. I really wasn't sure what to expect. I sort of anticipated that her dad would be a bit scruffy, not like a tramp, but like a tramp who had been pulled off the streets and given a new tracksuit, told to have a shave, but he was very smartly dressed. And he was also a very sincere and warm person. His fiancée was just as lovely too. The conversation was fixed, firmly on the future. No one seemed to want to talk about the past. Seeing the two of them, father and daughter, reconnect after all the time was quite special. There was so much about them that was similar. They hadn't seen each other for years, but their mannerisms, speech patterns, humour and kindness, it was all the same. As the night went on, I witnessed the girl that Jess regressed into back in March. She was starting to become a woman again. It was lovely to see. Her heart was beginning to heal. But mine felt shattered. Still. December, we were sort of dating again. Would go out, hold hands, have meals and all that. But that was about it. I'd hoped after she'd reconnected with her dad, Jess, she might want to push our relationship further. But she didn't seem inclined to. And to be honest, neither did I really. We just enjoyed each other's company and it was great. She spent Christmas with her dad, which was totally understandable. They had a fair few to catch up on. But she wanted to spend New Year's Eve with me. After the clock struck 12 and Auld Lang Syne and fireworks shenanigans, we went for a walk. In the middle of the night, she took me to this creepy park around the corner from her mum's, where we first started hanging out when we were teenagers. And under the moonlight, she got down on one knee and proposed to me. A year prior to that is all I've ever wanted from her. Obviously me to do the proposing, but we were barely back together and we were still slowly building back up our relationships. I told her not yet. January was her father's wedding, and understandably alcohol-free affair. Jess was a bridesmaid, which was cute, and she gave a speech as well at the toast. It was a difficult one. You know, they had a good 8 or 9 years together a decade ago, and bridged with almost 10 years of pain. A period of time he'd never spoken to her, and she'd never spoken to him, or she'd never spoken to me about before. Her dad, he asked me up to the bar, and he pulled me aside, and he told me that hearing Jess reminisce about her childhood, and only her childhood, leaving out that massive period of time where there was this huge empty gap in their relationship, it made him realize more than ever that they'd lost so much. Too much. The future was bright, but the two of them, they would never get that time back. No, he turned around and he said, I don't want both of you to make the same mistakes. He said that to me. Now it's getting towards the end of February, but it's just not a normal February. It's a leap year. And on the 29th, traditionally, the woman can ask the man to marry her. And when I think about it, she certainly is that now. She's a woman. You know, we've both grown a lot and also lost so much. Too much. And I don't want to let a single second slip by. So I think I'm gonna say yes.